Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody doing? Oh, let's try that again. How's everybody doing? I know, it's the end of the day. I get it. A lot of walking. It's been a busy day. I hope you're having a great time at Ignite. My name is Jeff Woolsey. This is my colleague, Vikram. And we are excited here for BRK141, Tools and Best Practices for Migrating VMware Environments to Azure. We've got a ton of content, so I'm getting right into it. The agenda today is we want to modernize to Azure for agility and innovation, migrate to Azure native, migrate to Azure IaaS, and talk about Azure for hybrid cloud. So we want to cover all the different scenarios, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. But let's talk about cloud transformation. Cloud transformation is truly a continuum, okay? I can tell you right now, the world, spoiler alert, actually, before I even answer this question, let me ask for a raise of hands. In terms of your cloud strategy, here's a simple question. Is your company public cloud only, private cloud only, or hybrid cloud? Those are your three options. Okay, first option, how many of you are public cloud only? Yep. And how many of you are private cloud only? Uh-huh. And let me guess, how many of you are hybrid cloud? And there all the hands go up. I do that because I want you to all see that you're all in the same boat. Every customer I talk to says, Jeff, yeah, we are moving a bunch of stuff to public cloud, and yeah, we're even cloud first. But we do have some workloads that are going to stay on-prem for the foreseeable future. So we need to live in a hybrid world. Well, that's where this transformation is a continuum, okay? Because we understand that people do want to migrate and modernize to the cloud. They want to maximize performance, scalability, and reliability. You want to enhance security and resilience for AI. You also want to have the agility for faster development for things like, yes, AI. Because guess what? All the tools that you need are readily available a couple of clicks away. You don't have to deal with, oh, I need to configure a GPU. These things are really, can be kind of pricey. I can use it for when I need it and turn it off and not pay any more for it. So you get that flexibility. At the same time, for those workloads that do need to stay on premises, you want to be able to extend your cloud so that it is truly hybrid, so that I can manage my things running outside of Azure, for example, but using the Azure control plane. So I have consistent management. And I can tell you, I've been at Microsoft for 22 plus years now, and I can tell you the number one problem I've heard from customers over years is, Jeff, I live in Paris, or I live in New York, or I live in San Francisco, and I can see my immediate data center, because I'm like right here. I have data centers around the world, and I have hundreds and maybe even thousands of branch offices around the world. I have no visibility into any of those at all. And it keeps us up at night. I don't know if I'm secure. I don't know if I have endpoint protection. I don't know that I'm patched. I don't know that my apps are healthy. So it's a continuum for migration and modernization and cloud transformation. Most customers require a mix. They will tell us right off the bat, yeah, I need some cloud, I need some on-prem. So when you think about the solution, what is it? You need to decide. And in the case of VMware, you need to decide what's your current VMware. You need to understand what it consists of. For example, if I got a bunch of SQL servers, sure, I could move that SQL Server VM into a SQL Server VM running in the cloud, but rather, why don't I just move it into cloud native Azure SQL, and then I don't even need to deal with patching or managing it because it's a cloud native service. We want to help you identify which of these workloads can move to cloud native so that you can get the best bang for your buck, the highest performance, the highest scalability, the highest availability, and the highest resiliency. And then we want to help you execute and optimize on that plan. And Vikram is going to walk you through this end to end, and I'm really excited for you guys to see this. Now, when it comes to cloud solutions, one of the things I get asked all the time is, okay, we all know that there have been some changes in the on-prem virtualization market. I'm just going to say that. I think you all know what I mean. Okay, there have been some changes. And so people will literally walk in and say, Jeff, I'm just looking for a drop-in replacement for VMware. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm on the engineering side of the house. I have nothing to do with sales or marketing. I'm not going to sell you anything. I can't sell you anything. But when they ask me that question, my answer is real simple. It doesn't exist. There is no drop-in replacement for VMware. I don't care what the Nutanix guy told you. I don't care what the open source guy told you. It doesn't exist. That's okay, though, because most customers actually don't really want a drop-in replacement. You know why? Because most customers want to do hybrid cloud. They want to, yes, run things in the cloud, yes, run things on premises, but with a single control plane to manage it all. That's what most people want. And that's what we're delivering with these comprehensive cloud solutions. So on the left-hand side, we've got Azure SaaS and PaaS. Again, move your workloads into cloud native if you can, because guess what? Get the maximum bang for your buck, the maximum resiliency, the maximum availability, best possible solution, best bang for your buck. Azure IaaS allows you to move it into virtual machines if you need to keep something in VMs. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about Azure IaaS today because I don't think people realize and how valuable it really is. Then, of course, we have Azure Local and Windows Server. If you need to run things on premises, guess what? We got fantastic solutions for you to run on premises, and I'll talk about that as well. So we got a ton to cover today. In terms of modernizing workloads to Azure native, well, again, why are you doing it? You're doing it for agility. Once you're doing things in the cloud, it's a couple clicks away. Whether it's, hey, I'm going to try a new AI thing, I need to spin up a new SQL database, I want to set up new DevOps infrastructure, I want to set up my CI/CD pipeline, agility is there because it's all a few clicks away. The efficiency of cost, only pay for what you need, especially on a cloud native service. Okay? If I only need to run something, some batch files for a certain amount of time, great, run it. When you're done, turn it off. You're not getting charged. Take advantage of that. What to modernize? There's a whole bunch of things that people tend to forget here. Like I said, databases are a perfect example. People think, well, I've got a SQL server running on-prem, so I'm just going to move that into a SQL Server VM, right? No. Certainly you can. Don't get me wrong. It's fine. It'll run great. But why wouldn't you move it into native Azure SQL? You get planetary scale. You get maximum availability. You get scaling up and down. It's awesome. And even if you didn't need that, there's also another option called SQL Managed Instances, also another cloud-native solution. For web apps, see lots and lots of web apps, lots of IaaS, lots of Apache. So am I going to take my IaaS server and move it up into the cloud and keep running it as a VM? Well, probably not. There may actually be some really good reasons that you do need to do that. But if you can, move it into a native cloud service, such as Azure App Services. Now I can host web apps. Don't need an OS, don't need a VM. It's a native cloud service. So there's lots of things that you want to modernize and take advantage of that. And the business outcomes you're trying to achieve is you want to eliminate all of the complexity that we've been doing in terms of management. For 20 plus years, we've used on-premises enterprise management tools. Today, we still ship System Center, by the way. Back in the day, remember Tivoli and OpenView and a bunch of enterprise management tools. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, you install a management tool, there's going to be a database behind it, there may be another logic tier in there, and by the way, there's usually lots of pieces of the puzzle. I'll use our own, for example, System Center. You got to install config-man, but then you got to install SQL database. You need to install ops-man, then you need to install another SQL database. VMM, then you need to install another SQL database. But I'm just getting started. Because guess what? Not only did I just install those, but now I have to manage these, I have to patch these, I have to deal with the care and feeding of the enterprise lifecycle management. And so if you're cool with that, great. Guess what? Most people are not cool with that because with the cloud, I don't have to do any of that. With the cloud, you just log into the Azure portal and guess what? We give you new features. Light up, log in, oh look, a new checkbox. Oh, guess what this will do? Oh, a new feature. Did you have to update any of that? Did you have to patch any of that? Did you have to manage that? No, we handled all of it for you. And so people have quickly realized, oh my gosh, using the cloud for management is like a no-brainer. And if I can use those same tools for my on-prem as well as my cloud, that's fantastic. So that's a tremendous business outcome. Popular cloud migrations. Quick question, how many of you have moved your Exchange to M365? Look at all the hands. See this all the time. It's a no-brainer. Like seriously, why do I need to run mail on-prem anymore? Like seriously, do I want to deal with DAGs and storage and all that complexity? Or, hey, Microsoft, you run it. We'll manage the people. We'll manage the accounts, sure. But you handle all that complexity. Well, guess what? After you Exchange, most people tend to immediately do SharePoint right afterwards. Once SharePoint's done, then you start to look at other things like, oh, well, Dynamics, CRM to Dynamics 365. And like I mentioned earlier, web apps. Very common thing is take your web apps and move them to Azure App Services. It's not running in a VM anymore. It's a cloud-native service. But it's providing me that web application experience. And I don't have to deal with patching or managing or any of that stuff. Ooh, yeah. So these are very popular cloud migrations. Now, when it comes to overview of migrating and modernizing VMware, there's a couple things. You have to figure out what workloads are ready to move to Azure native. For example, SQL databases, boy, you better be looking at Azure SQL. Exchange, yeah, you're not virtualizing that. You're going to move that in M365. Web servers, take a close look. There may be cases where you can move them. There may be cases where it actually needs to stay in Azure IaaS, and I'm going to show that later. But you need to decide, you need to rationalize where these workloads are going to go. You need to plan. How do you plan for this? You need to inspect everything. You need to inspect what are the architectures that I was using for the apps, not the infra, okay, because you're going to move to a new infra. But the applications themselves, are they using some sort of clustering technology, for example? Do I need to look at bandwidth? Okay, if I have an application that's specifically, very bandwidth hungry, we want to make sure we're taking that into account, so we want to plan for that. We, of course, want to design and test that. We want to validate this to ensure we have a successful and smooth transition. After testing, that's when we actually do the migrate. And folks, here's an important step. Everybody wants to jump to step 4. I can tell you every migration that I've run into with a customer where it's gone south, where it's gone sideways, is because they didn't do 1 through 3. They didn't do an assessment. They did minimal planning. They're like, nope, we're just going. Oh, no. Please, take the time. We'll even give you the tools to help you with this, which Vikram's going to show you. And then finally, modernizing, refactoring workloads. Are these apps that you've written where you've got the source code? Maybe it makes sense to actually deploy these in a different way and use modern cloud services to do it. So, with that in mind, I'm going to pass it off to Vikram to talk about Azure Migrate. Vikram?
Well, that kind of energy is hard to match up, but I'll try and keep up the pace. Azure Migrate, folks, how many, with a show of hands, how many of you have ever used Azure Migrate before this? Oh, great, that's a good number. But for those of you who haven't, I think this is the session for you because I'm going to show you how Azure Migrate helps you with the end-to-end migration and modernization journey, some of the aspects that Jeff was talking about. But before we jump in, let me just give you a quick sneak peek into the overall capabilities that Azure Migrate has to offer. And while, yes, this session is meant for VMware, but if you see on the left-hand side, you see all the different types of different underlying technologies, VMware, Hyper-V, bare metal, or even those servers which are running on some of the other public clouds as well, and different web applications, different type of databases. And right in the middle, you see the bridge to gap it all, which is the Azure Migrate that helps you do the discovery, generate a business case to get that exec sign-in, and also to go and assess for these different types of heterogeneous workloads as you move them over to Azure. And on the right, you'd also see what are the different Azure landing targets that you see. So for, let's say, your virtual machines, you have Azure VM. Or for VMware customers, you also have Azure VMware Solution. For storage, Azure Files, Azure Blobs, you name it. Similarly, for your databases, if you'd go ahead and see, you can move your SQL, as Jeff was mentioning, to Azure SQL DB, Azure SQL MI. The number of options are plenty. And you have these different bespoke tools which can help you with even doing that final leg of migration from left to right. And if at all you are that kind of customer, as I saw a lot of hands getting raised, who wants to keep their workloads hybrid, some of them you can migrate and the rest you can still continue to manage on premises using the services such as Azure Arc Center and Azure Local. Having said that, let me concentrate on one such scenario for VMware customers such as yourselves on how you can go ahead and use Azure Migrate to do the entire journey, migration or modernization from left to right using this one single tool. So here we've divided a customer's migration journey into 3 stages: decide, plan, and execute. When I talk about decide, it is when you actually make a decision that Azure is the right home for your VMware workloads. You actually envision the ROI and the total cost of ownership of running your workloads in Azure. In the plan stage, you actually do the right sizing and you actually do the right mapping of your workloads to different Azure landing targets. And not just that, we also help you perform the execution. That means doing the migration and modernization of your VMware workloads to Azure. Now let me talk about some of the key features or capabilities that we are announcing at Ignite this year in the decide phase. To start with now, with Azure Migrate, you can review the software and security insights, wherein you get to see your software inventory categorized into different classifications like security, monitoring, business applications, you name it. And you also get to see your overall security posture. I'll not spend too much time on the slides because I want to show you all of this in action in a demo. You can now also visualize the dependencies across all of the servers and workloads running in your on-premises data center using the multi-server dependency visualization, wherein you can see all of the discovered servers and their network dependencies in one single pane of glass. And now you can also define the applications that you're running on premises in your VMware environment. We are bringing first-class application object-based experiences-based workflows in Azure Migrate. And finally, you can also conclude the decide phase of your migration journey by envisioning the return on investment and total cost of ownership of running these VMware workloads in Azure. When I talk about the plan and execute phase, you'd see that you can now assess not just for your entire data center, but scope to a certain set of applications which the customer is most interested to migrate or modernize. We also now bring to you the integrated code scan capabilities that help you integrate code scan from cast highlight as well as GitHub Copilot code assessment. You can now do first-class migration wave planning using Azure Migrate, not just plan your waves, sequence them, but also execute and track these waves from the Azure Migrate tooling itself. And I have already covered this. You can execute and track these waves seamlessly from the tooling itself. Now comes the good part, wherein we have all the goodies packed together, so I'll switch to the demo. Now, for the purpose of this session, I have gone ahead and pre-recorded a demo. So what I'll be doing is I'll be playing and pausing at different stages just to emphasize more on some of these capabilities I spoke of. Now, as I mentioned, Azure Migrate is designed to help the customers throughout their journey, migration and modernization, to envision the ROI of running your workloads in Azure, to start planning for your migrations and modernizations, and to also execute and start running these workloads in Azure. Azure Migrate, since the last year at Ignite, some of you who may have attended, we had gone ahead and announced application-aware experiences for customers who are more interested in migrating and modernizing their applications and not just individual workloads. And we continue on that promise, and this time we bring you more application-centric experiences and more enhancements that we have brought into that. Before I go any further, let me just, because a lot of you here haven't used Azure Migrate, let me show you this in action. You can simply go to the Azure portal and search for Azure Migrate string, and you'd find the service. Then you can go ahead and start by creating an Azure Migrate project. It's a simple 3-step process. And this project will help you contain all of your discovered inventory in a secure and a compliant manner within your tenant. After you create an project, Azure Migrate project, you can go ahead and start the discovery. Yeah, let me just move along. Yeah. So once you have gone ahead and create your Azure Migrate project, you can start the discovery simply by doing an import of all of your inventory using a CSV import. Or you can also explore other VMware utilities such as RV tools. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. And if not that, you can also simply import from the configuration management databases that the customers are running on premises. We also bring to you, as part of this announcement this year, which is upcoming, a disconnected appliance. Now, for some of your customers who would not want a continuous connectivity with Azure, you can propose to them to do their discovery using a disconnected Azure Migrate appliance, wherein all of this is done in an offline mode. You can discover all of the inventory, and then you can go ahead and import it in one shot to your Azure Migrate project to get an ROI and assessment analysis within a matter of hours. But for those of you who have used Azure Migrate, I'm sure you're quite familiar with the Azure Migrate appliance. Now, Azure Migrate appliance helps you do a continuous collection of the inventory of your data center, wherein it's continuously connected with Azure so that you get the latest up-to-date. And if there are any changes in your IT environment, you get to see all of that information also populate in the Azure Migrate project. Now, an Azure Migrate appliance can work with any of the underlying technologies, be it VMware, Hyper-V, bare metal, or even IaaS services on other public clouds such as AWS EC2. All of this is possible using the Azure Migrate appliance, and there are just a few simple steps that you go ahead and deploy this appliance with. Now, for the purpose of this demo, I have already gone ahead and done all of my discovery. So I'll be next talking to you as to what that discovery looks like. So here what you see is the Azure Migrate overview experience, which helps a customer navigate very seamlessly through different important stages of their migration journey. Let us get started. Now here, the first thing on the left you'd see is a card. It shows you all of your inventory, all the inventory of your workloads, databases, web applications, servers. And you'd also see a certain number, which is currently 0, but I'll be covering that later, the applications. Once you have reviewed your inventory, you have understood your applications, you can move on to create a business case, which helps you envision the ROI and TCO of running these workloads in Azure. Then you can plan your migrations with an assessment or wave planning, and then simply go ahead and execute your migrations or modernizations. All of this is also possible from the TOC on the left, which helps you do this entire journey in a very structured manner. Let me now double-click into one such inventory view. Now, in this inventory view, what you'd see is that you get all of your inventory across infra, databases, web applications, servers, you name it, covering your Windows, Linux, SQL, PG/SQL, Java, .NET, all of this in one single pane of glass. Now, what this helps you understand is deeply get an idea of what your environment looks like, what your on-premises data center looks like. And now we also bring to you the software inventory, as I was mentioning earlier. Now, what this software inventory provides you is it provides you deeper insights. It's not just the inventory of the software running on the servers, but it gives you deeper insights in terms of the classification of this software in critical categories such as security, business applications, data platforms, and you name it. And not just that, we also bring to you the support status for some of these software versions, as well as potential recommendations on where these softwares can be moved to when you're planning the migration of your workloads to Azure. Here, you can go ahead and consider a repurchase strategy from Azure Marketplace, because we're giving those recommendations, or the SaaS alternatives that are available on Azure already. Along with the software inventory enhancements, we also bring to you the insights, the security insights. And that is currently powered through the software inventory and the information or the inventory we're pulling for servers. What you'd see here in the summary view is what all servers currently are actually having potential security risks. So basically, this is a one pane to see all of your security posture in one single go. You get to see a certain number of servers running end-of-support OS versions. You see certain servers which are having pending updates or critical updates missing. And we give you recommendations on how you can go and rectify these problems using Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Azure Update Manager. Currently, this view is showing you your security posture across servers and software. But very soon, we are also going to be including the security posture of your databases and web applications in the same view. Now, we have reviewed our inventory, and this all looks good. Let me now see how you can interpret or understand the applications that you're running in your on-premises data center. And here I bring to you a new announcement. This is what we call our dependency visualization across the entire project for all the discovered servers. Now, what this would do for you is here, it will help you understand the different tiers of your application, the boundaries of your application. And I'm actually going to zoom into one such example. Now, this is one such set of workloads that are running an application in my on-premises data center. I can double-click on any of these server nodes, and I'd be able to see the connections. Now, this is where the meat of this thing lies. What you'd get to see here is I get to see the connections between two servers at a more detailed level of processes and ports. Now, this is clear as a day just looking at this view that I am running a web tier on Java, and I'm running a data tier on PG/SQL, which is actually connected to each other on listening port 5432. Now, this helps me interpret my applications seamlessly and without any challenges. Once I have identified my application boundaries, I simply need to go ahead and group these the interdependent workloads together. And I do that by assigning an application tag to these workloads. Now, I have already understood or identified my application, but how do I go ahead and create this application or define this application to use it in the entire Azure Migrate workflows? This is where you go ahead and define this application by simply providing some basic details like the name, description, whether this application is an in-house custom application or a COTS application that is known as packaged. And after you provide these details, you can now link workloads. So just a few seconds back, I had shown you how you use the multi-server dependency visualization to identify the servers running our application. The same scoping you can use here to find the workloads. In that case, it was 𝗬𝗏𝗧onic Web Server, 𝗬𝗏𝗧onic Database Server, and you can go ahead and create an application simply by providing all of that. Now, what you'd see here is a bunch of applications I have created, and one which got selected right now was Paths Unlimited. That is another line of business application that I'm running on premises. And these are the applications now I'm interested to go analyze further and assess and understand how I can plan their migration and modernization. Now, let me go ahead and I have already done the inventory. I've already interpreted my applications. Let me go ahead and build a quick business case. Now, business case helps you envision the ROI. I've been using that term again and again, but let me show you how it actually works. You simply go ahead and create a business case by providing some very basic details, and you'd see a report such as this. Now, here you can clearly see that a modernization strategy for my applications running in my data center helps me save costs up to 50%. And not just that, I can also see an year-on-year cash flow, because a migration journey is not a 1 year or a 2-month journey. It's a journey which spreads out. So you can go ahead and see year-on-year migration journey in terms of cash flow here in this graph. You can now also get sustainability insights from this business case, wherein you get to see the carbon emission reductions that you can accrue by moving some of these workloads over to Azure. The business case report also gives you the costs and the savings across different migration strategies. So be it rehost, replatform, refactor, you get to see different strategies and what could be the right match or the right goal for your end customer. Now, I was just doing a lab a few minutes back, and somebody asked me this question, hey, how are these things calculated, right? This all looks good, but how is it calculated? So we are taking industry standard benchmarks to calculate the business case numbers, as you see here. But at any point in time, you can also go ahead and edit these assumptions to get a more context-specific business case for your customer. Great. I'm done with the decide phase. Now I'm quite convinced that I'm standing to make good amount of cost savings by moving my workloads to Azure. What's next? I can now go ahead and create a high-confidence migration plan using the Azure Migrate assessments and Azure Migrate wave planning experience. Let me show you how. Now, Azure Migrate assessment helps you understand the right optimal migration strategy for your applications and independent workloads running in your data center, be it rehost, refactor, replatform, some of it Jeff also was mentioning. And it helps you understand the ideal Azure target services, right size SKUs, and also helps you understand the cost and the migration readiness. Now let me go ahead and create one assessment for 2 of my core applications, which is 𝗬𝗏𝗧onic and Paths Unlimited. I can just provide these basic details, the target location, the environment of my application, also the programs or the offers, pay-as-you-go or Microsoft customer agreement. And I can go ahead and provide workload-specific properties as well or settings as well if I have certain past preferences for my workloads to move to. And I go ahead and create an assessment. Now, this assessment will give you basis your migration preference, right? Here, if you see the migration preference has been chosen as modernize because I saw in business case I stand to make a lot of cost savings if I modernize my applications. So I get to see optimal migration strategies basis my migration preference. And here, the preference is pass. You can go ahead and it is recommending that I can replatform my applications to pass targets in Azure. Let me double click into this and I'll show you the 2 applications, 𝗬𝗏𝗧onic and Paths Unlimited, and I can see when I double click into one such application, I can now get more details about what is the cost going to be for moving or modernizing my 𝗬𝗏𝗧onic application to Azure. Not just that, I can also go ahead and see that what does it take for me to modernize my application. If there are any gaps, I can go ahead and fix those gaps as well. And this is where I go ahead and see that. And if I double click on this further, I'd be able to see that Azure Migrate has recommended moving my web application to Azure App Service, something that Jeff was mentioning. It's not necessarily that you always do a rehost. You can actually also go ahead and modernize by modernizing your web apps to App Service and modernizing your PG-SQL to Azure Database for Postgre Flexible Server. It not just gives you the recommended target, but it also gives you configuration details as well as the recommended migration tool. So if you'd see here closely, you'd get to see that what tool is getting recommended for doing this migration as well. I can double click into the ready with conditions and I can actually find out what all do I need to do to make my PG-SQL server ready for a modernization. Now, one thing that we bring to you, which is again a new announcement at Ignite, is the possibility of integrated code scans into your applications to get those code scan reports. How can you do that? You can do that in two ways. You can either use cast highlight, or you can also use GitHub Copilot code assessment. Now, I can go ahead and use GitHub Copilot assessment here. I can simply request a report via GitHub Copilot. And what that would do is the developers at the 𝗬𝗠onic on-premises, they can go ahead and upload all of this information into GitHub issues. And Azure Migrate would be able to upload all of that, or automatically absorb all of that information from this application and update the assessment recommendations accordingly. Now, you'd see what was earlier a re-platform strategy. After doing the code scan integration, now the strategy has changed to refactor. Similarly, I can do the same for the other application as well, which is Paths Unlimited. And in that case, I can go ahead and use a cast highlight. And it will actually give me what are the code scan details, right? I can go ahead and use it as my reference point and take it to the app owners and tell them, here are the changes that you need to make to modernize your applications to Azure. So this is an example of code scan. Now, at any stage, I mean, you'd say, hey, no, I'm pressed for time. I don't have the time to do the modernization. That's OK. You can go ahead and change your migration preference to minimize migration time, and accordingly, the optimal migration strategy shown to you would change. And here you see a lift and shift strategy has been recommended to me. Now, what do I do next? Now, I have done half of the planning, but there's more to go. You can actually do the sequencing of your migrations using the Azure Migrate wave planning experiences that we bring to you at Ignite this year. You can simply go ahead, create a wave. And again, here, I can decide that for my 𝗬𝗠onic application, I want to move it quickly, so I'll use the lift and shift recommendations. Versus the other application, which I had Paths Unlimited, I can go ahead and modernize that because it had low to no code changes. Now, when I do that, I can actually not just plan my migration waves, but I can even execute the migration waves and track them from one single pane of glass. Now, my planning is through. So I'm done with the decide, I'm done with the planning. Now comes the real deal, which is the execution part. Now, Azure Migrate not just helps you decide and plan, but also helps you to execute. And it gives you guided next steps on how you can actually do migrations. And it has native lift and shift capabilities that you can go ahead and use. Let me show you how real quick. Now, when you're doing the execution of your workloads, you can actually use the native capabilities of Azure Migrate to lift and shift. If you remember, I created a wave for 𝗬𝗠onic application saying I'd be using lift and shift recommendations. I can simply go back to that wave and execute that migration from there itself. Now, when I do that, I can simply see there are two different servers in this application, and I can start their replication, and I can track their replication from one single pane, which is through wave tracking. Now, once I'm done with the lift and shift of these two servers, what you'd see is my application would come about seamlessly in Azure. But that's not it. If, let's say, I was also interested in doing the modernization, which was the case for the other application, Paths Unlimited, here you'd see that there are some integrated tooling that you can go ahead and use. In this case, we are using Database Migration Service, DMS, to do the modernization of your SQL instances to Azure SQL MI. Just with a few simple steps, you'd see my database would get modernized to Azure SQL MI. And much similar, you can also do the modernization of your web applications using the App Service Migration Assistant. And there you can go ahead and modernize your web application to Azure App Service as well. Those are a few simple steps. This is the Azure App Service Migration Assistant as well. Now, once all of this is done, you'd see both the workloads are modernized, and your application comes up seamlessly in Azure Migrate, and you can see the Paths Unlimited application right here. Now, what have we learned, folks? Basically, very simply put, Azure Migrate is an end-to-end tool that helps you with each of your stages. We bring to you some really exciting features where the entire journey is covered with applications in mind. And not just applications, but also your independent workloads. With that, I'll hand it back to Jeff.
Thank you, Vikram.
And
awesome.
Hope that you folks start using Azure Migrate for those of you who haven't so far.
Awesome, Vikram. Thank you. Again, the focus here was using the Migrate tool to go to PaaS and SaaS, take advantage of cloud native. Now, the one area I wanted to drive into was a little bit with Azure IaaS, because what I'm hearing from a lot of VMware customers is quite simply, look, I'm used to doing things a certain way. I've been doing things for a long time. I'm comfortable. I'm familiar with VMware. And as I look at the cloud, things are different. Like I've had literally people ask me where the vMotion button is on Azure. I'm like, what? No. You're thinking the old way. There's a new way to think about it. The other thing to think about is IaaS in general. We talked about moving to cloud native, and that's certainly the way I would go, but there are definitely scenarios where people say, I need to actually keep it in a VM. For example, there are folks in highly regulated industries like healthcare and finance that are delivered applications as a VM. And these are actually regulated and go through compliance, and they have to stay in a VM or for support. If they were to take that web server, for example, and move it into an app service, it's immediately out of support, and they can't do that because they need those applications to be supported in a regulated environment. So let's assume for a second your organization is using these applications, these COTS-delivered applications. Maybe you have custom applications you wrote yourself, and they need to stay in VMs. So the common questions I hear are, well, I'm used to doing certain way on premises, such as virtualization, high availability, load balancing. How do I achieve 5 nines of uptime? How do I do role-based access control? How do I perform these operations in the cloud? Because again, it's a different paradigm, okay? How do I actually improve uptime, availability, and security? So in this demo, I'm going to focus on Azure IaaS. And my demo flow is, I'm going to actually, I'm going to use just-in-time administration. I want to show you best practices. I'm going to use Windows Admin Center to manage Windows servers that don't have public IP addresses. We're keeping them locked down. We're going to deploy them behind an application gateway, and we're going to enable Defender for Cloud. So the scenario is this. I've already created a resource group, which is just a grouping of virtual machines. It's got 2 virtual machines, 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 1 and 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 2. And this is actually based off a real scenario where a customer said, I was delivered an application that I have to keep in virtual machines, and I'm actually using IaaS as the web application. We're using premium SSD storage in Azure, and the reason why is because if you use premium storage with an availability set, you actually get 5 nines of uptime right there. Most people don't realize it's that simple. Okay, premium SSDs, because you've got redundant storage, and availability sets, you have redundant fault domains. These VMs are connected via virtual network, but they don't have a public IP address. And these VMs are in an availability set with 2 fault domains and 2 update domains. And the way to think about a fault domain is it's a physical grouping of hardware. Think racks, think power, networking that isolates hardware failures, while update domains is grouping of VMs for coordinated maintenance. So in this first phase, we're going to verify that our VMs are in that availability set. We're going to install Windows Admin Center with just-in-time access, and we're going to configure just-in-time access and deploy these IaaS virtual machines. Let's get to it. So to verify that the virtual machines are correctly associated with the availability set, I'm going to begin by navigating to the list of virtual machines in the Azure portal. I'm going to select the first virtual machine named IaaS 1. Within the VM's details, locate the section called Availability and Scaling. And you'll see an option there for Availability Set. To confirm, click on that 𝗲𝗲 Availability Set link. And in the overview, you will see that both 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 1 and 2 are shown running, confirming that both VMs are correctly configured within the availability set. So again, 2 different fault domains, 2 different update domains. Awesome, okay? Next, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install Windows Admin Center on each node. Now for time purposes, I'm just going to show you this on the first VM. So let's go ahead and do that. To install Windows Admin Center, we open the outbound port required for installation to ensure network connectivity. After installation, we're going to set up role-based access control for managing Windows Admin Center. We're going to click Add Role Assignment, search for Windows Admin, and select Windows Admin Center role and click Next. Now here I can add users, I can add groups, I can add managed identities, and in this case I'm going to add the 𝗲𝗲 Prime account. Now this setup allows specific users to access Windows Admin Center in the Azure portal and connect to a target Windows server without opening any public ports. So Windows Admin Center is inside of Azure communicating with my Windows server. Guess what? There's no public IPs. So very secure, very locked down as we set this all up. Now, we're going to configure just-in-time access and deploy IaaS. So now we're going to use, whoops, try that again. Now, we're going to show VMs with just-in-time access via Defender for Cloud. So just-in-time limits management port access to specific times for just a few hours, which enhances security. And to select, I'm going to configure and request JIT, which opens the required ports temporarily for secure VM connections. Here, we're using Windows Admin Center to connect and follow best practices by granting administrative access only as needed. Now in Windows Admin Center, we're going to go to Windows Server Roles, expand the web server, choose the web server, and look at this. I'm installing IIS from Windows Admin Center to a virtual machine without any public IP addresses. And I would do the same exact thing on VM2. So I've deployed web services, and again, done all of this without a public IP address. So, success. We've enabled Windows Admin Center, we've used just-in-time administration, and we've enabled IaaS. So I've got my 2 virtual machines. Next, I want to deploy this behind an application gateway. And we want to safely ensure that we're going to put both of these VMs behind a gateway. So when I actually put this and make this available, no one's communicating with the VMs directly. The public IP address will be to the application gateway, which then load balances to the VMs on the backside, in the backend pool. So I'm going to start by going to the virtual machines section here in the Azure portal, and I'm going to select 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 1, and I'm going to open its network settings and create a network security group. And what we're doing here is we're creating the network to connect my personal IP address so that I can test this. Again, no public IPs, but I want to create an inbound port rule specifically for my IP address. So I'm copying my personal IP address, I'm setting the rules priority to 115, I'm naming it HTTP test inbound, I'm applying the rule, and then I'm going to repeat the same process for 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 2. And this enables access via port 80 from my personal IP address. Again, so nothing is wide open to the internet at all. Now to verify that this all works, I'm going to bring up my browser, and I'm going to visit each host's fully qualified domain name. And for each host, I'm going to see a slightly modified default website proving that these hosts are available. There's 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 1 and there's 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 2. So these are publicly available, but only to my IP address. So again, it's still secure and locked down. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put the appliance gateway in front of these. Okay? And these will be in the backend pool. So to add a subnet for the application gateway, we go to the virtual network section in the Azure portal, select the network link to our IaaS VMs, and add a new subnet. I'm calling this one App Gateway Subnet, and it's starting at 10.0.1.0. Although there are additional configuration options here, we don't need any of these. We just need a basic subnet configuration. That's all we need. So now that we've got the application gateway in place, we need to update each VM's network security group to allow incoming traffic from the subnet on port 80, so requests actually reach the IaaS servers, because remember, those suckers are locked down, okay? So we're going to allow the application gateway to communicate with the VMs. I start by selecting the network security group associated with 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 1. Within the NSG settings, I add a new inbound security rule. I specify the source subnet as the application gateway subnet, set the service to HTTP, assign an appropriate priority, provided a name, and click Add to save the rule. And I would do the same thing on the second virtual machine. I repeat this, the one that's associated with 𝗲𝗲 IaaS 2. And what this does is ensuring both VMs are configured to accept HTTP traffic from the application gateway subnet. So with these updates, the network security groups and their target rules are now configured to permit traffic from the application gateway to the VMs on port 80. All right? So finally, we are going to start by searching for the application gateway in the Azure portal, and now we're going to deploy the application gateway. We're going to click Create. We're going to select Application Gateway. We're going to place it in the same resource group, so both VMs and the application group are in the same resource group. We're going to call it 𝗲𝗲 App Gateway 2, use the default settings. We're going to choose 𝗲𝗲 IaaS as the virtual network and select the pre-configured application gateway subnet. On the front ends page, I'm going to create a new public IPv4 address named 𝗲𝗲 Gateway Public IP or PIP. And for the backend pool, I'm going to add the IP addresses of Java IaaS 1 and 2. And with that, we have now created all of the necessary components, and we are going to test the application gateway. So I'm going to select Java App G2. I can see that the public IP address of the gateway. I'm going to go to the backend pools to see my IaaS backend pool. I can see the health of the VM nodes in the pool, so if something goes wrong, I can check those here. There's the backend health of both of my virtual machines. I can open up a tab, and I can paste in the public IP address of the gateway, okay, of the gateway. Click refresh, and you can see it's load balancing between Java IaaS 1 and Java IaaS 2. So that is the beauty of being able to take advantage of things like application gateways and do things in a different way. So lastly, when it comes to different solutions for modernization, as I mentioned before, when we look at our solutions for VMware migration and modernization, we've got a number of these. We've got SaaS and PaaS. We've talked about those. We also have Azure Local. And of course, we have Windows Server. And I want to just quickly alert you to an announcement we made today with the launch of Windows Admin Center Virtualization Mode. This is a new purpose-built virtualization management console for Windows Server Hyper-V. This allows you, it's delivered as an appliance model for easy setup. You can literally download Admin Center in under 5 minutes, connect it to your Hyper-V servers, and be managing servers and clusters using Windows Admin Center Virtualization Mode. If you're used to Windows Admin Center of the past, this is a completely different animal. This is stateful, as opposed to Windows Admin Center, what we now call administrative mode, which was stateless and constantly communicating. Windows Admin Center V mode actually has a database underlying it. It manages multiple stateful connections and allows us to actually manage the virtualization fabric, including Hyper-V host, storage, networking, compute, all through Windows Admin Center Virtualization Mode. And with that, we are a bit over time, and I want to apologize, but thank you all for staying. We will have lots more at the booth. I would highly recommend, if you want to check out the new Windows Admin Center Virtualization Mode, there is the link. Grab your cameras right now, start taking pictures. I posted a blog on this morning, and already social media is going pretty nuts about this. So Windows Admin Center Virtualization Mode. We also have documentation that's already readily available, and you can stay up to date with the latest in vMode. And with that, I want to say thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of Ignite.